Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, über alles in der Welt.
Hello everyone, my name is Pat Cam, and my presentation is on the Grassroots movement in Germany from 1972 to 1985. The importance of nonviolent campaigns is that, if successful, it can create a better society without the need for a violent revolution. Nonviolent actions implies the dedication of utilizing nonviolence and creative means, such as acts of protest and persuasion. Non-cooperation or direct action. All of these things are active processes in order to bring political, economic, social, or moral pressure to those in power to not only recognize but to change the inequalities of their society. The events that sparked the movement was in September 1972, a man from the West German city of Augsburg chains himself to a street sign in central Barcelona. He carries signs protesting the Spanish government's persecution of conscientious objectors, who are people that refuse to join military service. In October and November of 1983, tens of thousands of demonstrators across the Federal Republic of Germany, also known as the FRG, blockaded military bases and government facilities to protest plans to deploy U.S. Cruise and Pershing II missiles in West Germany. In Birmingham, 3,000 blockaders held their guard against violent attacks by the police. In Bonn, 5,000 blockaders besieged the Bundestag, federal parliament, as it debates formal acceptance of missiles. Despite massive protest, the Bundestag approves deployment. These actions were informed by a doctrine of nonviolent civil disobedience. In 1972, the concept of nonviolent civil disobedience was little known. It soon, however, became very popular 12 years later and will become a central factor in West Germany's politics, widely endorsed by peace movements, and the largest social movement in post-war Germany history. The creation of the Grassroots network began in the early 1970s, which advocated using nonviolent actions to transform society along anarchist or libertarian socialist lines formed by radical Christians and libertarians. In the 1980s, most of these groups formed the Federation of Nonviolent Action Groups as a focus for the Grassroots organization. They were the first leftist organization in the Federal Republic to join the movement against nuclear powers and develop alliances with citizen initiative groups. They were among the first groups for conscientious objectors to advocate total objection, the refusal of civilian alternative services. They were the first organizations outside Protestant churches to cultivate ties with the independent organizations peace groups in Germany's Democratic Republic. They were the first groups to combine theories of nonviolent social defenses with direct action. Grassroots activists also rejected the then existing socialist models, the USSR or China, arguing that these states perpetrated militarism, social hierarchy, and ecological destruction in more centralized forms. Grassroots networks drew ideas and examples from pacifists such as Gandhi and Martin Luther King. For example, they endorsed forms of action, both legal, such as demonstration and boycotts, and illegal actions, such as civil disobedience, blockades, and occupations. They also have many differences as well, such as endorsements of attacks on property if they did not endanger people directly or indirectly. The reasons why Martin Luther King and Gandhi's movements were so successful was that they focused on dealing with issues such as racism and discrimination, while on the other hand, the grassroots largely focused on universal aspects of oppression, the structural violence that pervades society and affects all social groups, also known as militarism. Through anti-militaristic work in the 1970s, which were violent, isolated the movements from major peace groups. Martin Luther King and Gandhi also faced militant groups that promoted violent actions, but they did not let that define their nonviolent agenda. Nazism destroyed Germany's radical movement of the early 20th century, creating a major break in the leftist politics. Women in grassroots groups often pushed their focus towards sexism, like against the conscription of women into the military. But the network did not oppose sexism either inside or outside the network. Other forms of oppression such as racism, class oppression, heterosexism, and anti-Semitism were all problems their society, but were never a major focus of the network's attention. A liberation movement that is nonviolent sets the oppressors free, as well as the oppressed, by Barbara Demings. This whole entire movement is related to Barbara Demings' theory on nonviolence. The main issues with the movement and Demings' theory is that it is far too philosophical for the masses to understand. For example, during the peace movements of 1982 to 1983, the nonviolent movement exploded beyond previous campaigns. Thousands of nonviolent action groups and affinity groups formed across Germany. This would be seen as a success, but most people protesting had little or no understanding of the grassroots philosophy. The more it spread, the more political content was lost or radically diluted. Like the Arab Spring protests, the primary participants were college students. The difficulties of movements being run primarily by the youth is that intellectual debates sometimes occur. Students often disperse during university vacations, move from city to city frequently, and most would be dropped off if they go to their degrees and find a good job. They were also leaderless and scattered, which is why they failed in some aspects. Based on the graph between 1970s to 1980, unemployment was on the rise, just like in the Arab Spring protests. Unemployment is a key factor that leads to rebellion among the youth. Another flaw of the movement was that the demographic was mostly young, educated German males in the middle class, so they weren't subjected to inequalities as well. Although the movement was unsuccessful in most areas, it was successful in others, like they influenced the development of the Green Party in 1979 to 1980. In conclusion, the issues surrounding the grassroots movement includes historical discontinuity on the left, the legacy of Nazism and war, the role of students and politics, political violence, the new social movements, the changes of value, and the emergence of the Green Party. So, why is it important? That a small group of people with a clear perspective in what is possible, a commitment to what they consider important, and the patience to stick to the task can be accomplished a surprising amount. They become a pivotal force.